probably shouldn't talk right now. Like sit. Well, I don't care. I can tell what I would put it all up on my body, good confession.
Following my somewhat public disavowing of dirty work in Richmond last year, I have become an enemy of the state in the city of Kwangya. There are wanted signs with my face in the city center. My office at the Kwangyan Federal Court has been ransacked and vandalized, and I have Mais in middle school threatening to shoot me with a gun on the streets of Kwangya should they ever see me in person. You can imagine my surprise, as someone who has quite literally placed the bricks that make up the city sidewalks that so many Kwangyan residents have come to enjoy, that I am now a fugitive in my own home city. Next Level was my #1 stream song 2 years in a row, only followed up by Stamp On It in 2023 and then Supernova in 2024. I will flash my credentials on the screen. I'm not new to this. I am true to this Kwangya stuff. Among the very first to see the new Evo, I was once Head Mai, the standing district attorney who fought so eagerly for the representation of Kwangyans worldwide. I have watched my city rise and fall, and now my legacy along with it. So it's a good thing I really like this album. Lemonade, the second full-length album, isn't aespa at their most innovative, but it is aespa at their most self-aware. It's a project that wants to channel the bitterness behind their success into a narrative about finding strength. But we're thrown a bit of a curveball with the 2 singles from this album, as they for some reason or another decide to soften that idea into a performative kind of coolness or an overly polished sweetness. In contrast, the album's strongest moments are the songs that embrace the grit and emotional texture that have always given aespa's music its conviction. Starting with the pre-release, Whole Different Animal has a very compelling musical edge, but once again suffers from a lot of the same shortcomings as the previous 2 singles that came before it. Visually, there's this insanely high concept, mythic storytelling in the artwork as it means to represent the album, but then the song itself is this kind of paltry, braggadocious appropriation of hip-hop styles and aesthetics. If you aren't sold on G-Dragon's verse, the song also doesn't really go anywhere, which is a bit hard to reconcile with as a pre-release single. The issue, I think, is that songs like this often dilute themselves in order to sell the idea that the narrator can't be bothered. Like, they're so far above whatever is being discussed, so they tonally won't even give it the time of day. Whole Different Animal treads down this road yet again, but definitely rises above dirty work in the painfully brief moments where the song does pick up. There are moments in the verses that get us to where I think we need it to be, but then things quickly fall back to the ground by the time we reach the very flat chorus and post-chorus. Now, aespa can pull off sing-talking. I think Whiplash is a masterclass example of that. We know they can do this well, but this specific area and genre of, musical angst and grit and texture that this group seems very interested in entertaining as a part of their artistic image keeps falling apart in these ways. Tone is still the #1 killer here, and the reason why Armageddon continues to be the best rendition of this style is because it focused on expressing conviction. Armageddon kept its storytelling in the abstract. It's arguably a "I'm gonna get what I want, so back off haters" type of song, but you don't glean that immediately. The title itself, Armageddon, is not so easily explained, and playing off of that is the sentiment "I'ma get it done." So something's gonna happen, you're not gonna see it coming, and by the end, I'm gonna get what I want. Wonderful, classy narrative. It thrives in being understated. What helps build it all together on top of that in a convincing way is the texture in tone. The members are allowed to sing. Verses trail off into full-on belts. The vocals descend and harmonize with the instrumental behind them as we progress. Armageddon reads like they have enough conviction to pull off whatever they're setting their eyes on, whereas Whole Different Animal actually reads as so overly concerned with appearing unbothered that there's actually a hint of desperation behind it. They have a lot less room to cover, simply being a whole different animal that's trying to provoke you to do something, right? This is what makes it a little difficult to talk about, because underneath all of this is an honestly fantastic song trying to claw its way out. Winter's, quote, "Wrote it on my body, I've had enough" line in the first verse is the unexpected climax of the song, less than a minute in. It's brief, but it bridges together the production, lyricism, and vocal delivery that Whole Different Animal desperately needed to be built upon in order to sell G-Dragon's flat refrain in the post-chorus. I can see the vision behind the flatness. There's a timeline where this would have worked, functioning as a sort of standstill moment from the intensity of the fight we're in. Except we're not really in a fight, and things aren't that intense. The thing that's missing is a believable sense of conviction. The tone and lyrics really work against the members in this sense. That's why Winter's verse is so great yet so frustrating. For 2 blissful seconds, the song suddenly has a soul to it.
Wrote it on my body, I've had enough. 의심 없이 다시 또 내디뎌.
The frustration and exhaustion, the conviction finally comes through. Wrote it on my body, I've had enough. You can hear the version of Whole Different Animal that I think needed to exist in order to make this song great, but pretty soon after this, the song retreats back into its more detached sensibilities before it's allowed to build on that momentum and emotional complexity. The actual chorus to this song, quote, "It is what it is, they be like who's she's a whole different animal," settles us back into that unbothered tone that asks us to, I guess, accept a sense of confidence that has not yet been earned. It's just not believable. It's punctuated by these high-pitched, wavering flourishes that again seem to tease a song with far more nerve and ambition than what we've ultimately been given. The selling point, the whole idea of this song, is that Whole Different Animal is threatening to transform into something bigger, but doesn't. It has the restraint to do so. Beneath all of it sits this slow-moving, muffled brass that sways from side to side, giving the entire track a tremendous sense of weight. Our narrators are carrying something immense without ever letting it show. A threatening presence is what is promised to us, but it's never realized. I don't think the song earns its sense of restraint in a satisfying way. I think if we would have committed to Winter's short but impassioned delivery in the first verse, it could have brought us somewhere a little bit better. In essence, the shortcomings of Whole Different Animal are exactly what's been slowly poisoning the Kwangyan well, and I still don't understand why SM keeps veering into this direction. The concepts continue to promise something harsher or more emotionally complicated than what the music ultimately delivers. aespa have risen to the top of the industry due to their unwillingness to pull any punches. They go in all the way, they don't step on the brakes, right? On whatever concept is put in front of them. aespa themselves still bring the energy to the best of their ability. You can feel that in the moments that they're allowed to, but the production and writing just continues to fall through on them. Moving on to the title track, Lemonade, the song is great. But my one small but kind of big grievance with it at times is that it's way too sugary. This song is at its most compelling in the lower register. Lemonade is held together tightly by its first two very brooding choruses.
I go in all the way, don't step on the brakes, I take my drama straight, I'll make it lemonade.
These sections are so insanely well composed. We've dropped very close to the floor in the verses to open up the space as we enter the chorus. Musically, this is maybe the moment our narrator tilts her chin down, focusing in on the target. What seems to be the post-chorus, the brighter quote, I'll make it lemonade, I got no ETA refrain, brings us into a sugar-laden headspace. Mechanically, all of this makes sense, turning the sourness of the lemons you've been given into something sweet and refreshing. The song's shift between forms is justified. The brightness and the hooks feel necessary in this way, but it's simultaneously the least interesting part of the song for me. Lemonade is a song about externalizing the negative effects in your life, taking the drama straight, reconciling with it with so much intensity that you can find the silver lining in the conflict to make it benefit you. The darker moments in the chorus key us into the fact that the narrator kind of revels in the negativity and drama that finds them, to the point that they want to make more lemonade. We learn the big reveal ahead of the final chorus. The sentiment, quote, I'll make it lemonade, turns into I need more lemonade. This, as it turns out, is my point of friction with the song. The final stretch of Lemonade after the bridge doesn't make much sense musically. They're addicted to overcoming adversity, they thrive on it, but the song kind of forgets that it's the bitterness that is propelling this narrative forward. I think I was expecting the darker instrumentation to return to somehow modify the final chorus with this new idea of wanting the lemonade in mind. Something a bit more chaotic, or even sinister, akin to Supernova's breakdown in its final refrain. Instead, we get the final I go in all the way chorus over a modified version of the verses. The finale we get feels strangely unsure of itself. It's similar to Rich Man in that way. There's a very clear message here, but for some reason only decides to meet it about 75% of the way musically. Very uncharacteristic of aespa. I think that's where I'm at with this song. I fully understand the presence of its sugary refrains. They're catchy, and they definitely give the song a huge amount of staying power, but they just don't land for me without a resolution by the end. Good lemonade still tastes like lemons. That's the whole point. The sweetness works because the bitterness is still there underneath it. The song understands this metaphor intellectually, but not emotionally. It successfully sweetens the bitterness, but sweetens it so much that it forgets why the bitterness matters in the first place. Something I think is important to consider in all of this, part of the brooding chorus features the same exact delivery of the sugary post-chorus as an ad-lib.
Take my drama straight, I'll make it lemonade, I'll make it lemonade, no way, no way, I'll make it lemonade, no way, no way.
I'll make it lemonade. There's some kind of musical understanding that the sweetness is still doused in the bitterness, but that's an idea that is never followed through on in this song. As the centerpiece of the album and also its namesake, Lemonade becomes the lens through which we are meant to hear the rest of this album. Even if I don't think the song fully completes its own musical metaphor, it absolutely understands where the album needs to go narratively. That bitterness is still the heart of this story. The resolution of Lemonade, or maybe lack thereof, sets you up to expect a similar kind of sweetness to the rest of the album, but that's really not the case. Right away, we actually veer back towards the much more interesting, more textured, and darker ideas in our first B-side, SHAKIN. This is a groovy dance track with a lot of grit to its bass. Immediately on first listen reminded me of Boys by Jesse Nelson, a similar kind of swaggy Y2K hip-hop style with a focus on melodic delivery, especially in the verses. Narratively, SHAKIN does fall into many of the same conventions that might have turned people away from Whole Different Animal. I think a difference here, however, is that the music actually works to earn the attitude. That dragging, lumbering bass gives the song a great sense of momentum. The arrangement keeps introducing new textures, the vocals are allowed to, break away from predictable phrasing, and by the time we reach the breakdown, the song finally cashes the check it's been writing since the first chorus. Immediately, our first B-side, the album seems to be acutely aware of what the singles left on the table. If nothing else, SHAKIN follows through on the grit and bravado. There's a musical payoff here, escalating, changing shape, and then by the final refrain, it feels like it's finally become the version of itself it promised from the start. This is not acceptable behavior. It does the very important work of expressing something more emotionally honest. It's not just a heavier song for the sake of being heavy, right? The swag has something to push against, and for the first time in the album, the tension between the bitterness and confidence feels genuinely resolved in some ways. Quote, "We bring the juice, a narrative through line with lemonade in mind. I like what I'm seeing. I like what I'm hearing." These ideas are expanded as we unexpectedly transition into full-on mid-tempo rock with Can't Help Myself. The Everybody Hates refrain on this song leans on a pretty overplayed melodic idea, but it hardly matters to me at least, because everything surrounding it is so committed. We're finally in the zone. I also think that the lyrical sentiment of the everybody hates idea benefits from not really being expanded upon. You could infer it as meaning to suggest that we all have the potential to hate things and probably will. Or, and what I think is more likely, is that the refrain could be bridging together the other sentiments expressed in this song. Everybody hates that I continue to live as myself, but I can't help that. Those are your problems, they're not my problems. The guitar here is allowed to break loose towards the end, riffing off the rails while the production and vocal arrangement have enough room to shift underneath it. The song gains a second wind in the last 30 seconds. Again, reinforcing that everything leading up to this point actually had somewhere it wanted to go. There's follow-through, there is conviction, ending on a simple Jesus. Really such a great decision. It lets all of the intensity of this song sort of stumble over the finish line instead of resolving neatly. I think that circles back to the bitterness concept in a very thoughtful way. As someone who was, and still is, a staunch defender of Lingo's yee-haw sensibilities from the Girls album, I don't mind aespa experimenting like this. If anything, I want more of this. The catch is that they need to be allowed to commit, Mr. SM Entertainment. When they're allowed to go all in without sanding off the rough edges or second-guessing the concept, they always exceed expectations. aespa is not the group to meet anything halfway. They have too much ability to be compromising on anything. Listening to Can't Help Myself, I fully believe I can sit myself in the scenario that aespa are wearing cowboy hats at an old western bar. They've lived in this small town in rural Arizona all their lives and won't take anything less than what they deserve. I'm ready for the Kwangyan rodeo. Cowboy Kwangya, time to strike a match and light up this juke joint. Camouflage shifts us back into aespa's digital DNA. It's a light, hyperpop electronic track dotted with little analog computer sounds. The entire song exists inside a machine, musically outlining the digital space aespa has grown up in, both conceptually in terms of Kwangya and, of course, in terms of experiencing fame online. Camouflage is lyrically about suppressing true emotions in order to maintain composure, and for a group whose career has been shaped by constant online visibility, the digital soundscape becomes part of the narrative. Even as one of the album's softer moments, it doesn't lose sight of the bitterness at its core. This is becoming the biggest difference between the B-sides and the singles. The vulnerability is allowed to exist alongside the tension. Camouflage is all around a standout on the album, setting the groundwork for a new musical territory they could explore at this point in their career. Hyperpop and digital soundscapes do seem to be the favorite style among fans and listeners of aespa by far, and this song rises to meet, I think, all of the expectations of both the fans as well as aespa as artists who are increasingly interested in expressing their perspective as idols through the music. I think Camouflage is a very healthy, very strong middle ground for all of this. The next song is Bite, Dirty Work's much more successful cousin at the family gathering who everybody dotes on. It features a similar focus on dissonant, metallic, and dripping instrumentation that we heard on Dirty Work, but Bite seizes hold over its own narrative in its willingness to vocally embrace the same kind of complexity as the music behind them. Ningning taking over the second chorus is a godsend. She injects just enough personality into the melody that the song suddenly starts climbing instead of circling in place. That extra bite, pun intended, carries all the way to the fake-out chorus and the extended final refrain, giving the ending a genuine sense of oomph. There's something here. The song ends on a satisfying note. The narrative could, I guess, skew a bit corny to some people, but a sense of emotional conviction smooths over a lot of the rough edges, at least for me. More importantly, it goes a little bit past the surface of just a back-off hater's narrative. There's bitterness, resentment, keeping in line with the lemonade concept. The fruits of what aespa bear as artists start out as something incredibly sour, and I think that's supposed to be the general point of this album. The sourness it takes to be able to enjoy anything. It's the suffering that gives you perspective perspective on how to appreciate what you have. Whether that's the intention or not, I can't help but hear songs like Bite through this lens, considering why they keep returning to these rough and rugged soundscapes, why they keep advocating to stay in this territory. aespa have spent years under an extraordinary level of scrutiny, and songs like Bite finally leave enough room for them in order to make it feel convincing. Again, focusing in on why they keep staying here, pop rock and hip hop songs with a lot of grit to them provide moments of catharsis from all of the noise. It provides aespa as artists and performers with a vessel to externalize some of these pressures. As I said last year, I completely understand the move towards songs like Dirty Work and Rich Man. I just wish they hadn't been so watered down. I want the grit, I want the texture, and a refusal to be complacent. Bite does this. It sets the groundwork for this style of music in a very meaningful way. No corners feel like they've been cut, and this is where Lemonade shines the most for me. And thankfully, we progress to Switchblade, arguably the best song on the album and definitely the most important musical moment on Lemonade. We're already venturing back into the territory of maybe best K-pop songs of all time. I need the verve, and Switchblade has it. Most of Lemonade up until this point has been content to refine the musical space aespa have already carved out for themselves. It rests pretty comfortably in the shade of what's been built before them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, by the way, but Switchblade is very different in this regard. It feels like the first song here that genuinely pushes the needle forward. It gains an incredibly valuable edge over the rest of the project in that way, thoughtfully mixing aespa's futurism with current trends in the industry. The perfect marriage of ideals that I think SM is looking for with this group. We ride along on a solar plane of drone synths, building us up to the now it's time to slash transition section. I really hate to kick Whole Different Animal while it's down, but this is how you build a transition section. Every piece of buildup has a purpose, so when the song finally does pivot, it feels earned and not arbitrary. The song sheds its crystalline edges for Ty Dolla $ign's verse, folding in on itself before revealing another hidden blade, a trap-infused hip-hop beat with sirens that aespa eventually join in on for a new refrain to close out the song. We end with these staccato hits, indicating yet another transition off-screen and hammering home the Switchblade sensibility of always changing. This song is perfect, all things considered. It does everything I've been expecting and needing from aespa these past couple of releases, and I think, to be clear at this point, I don't think every aespa song needs to explode into a grand finale. Not every aespa song needs to be hard-hitting. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but just for right now, and to make a comparison, I would say Whiplash barely leaves its lane in terms of structure, but every drop in that song feels purposeful. The issue with aespa's recent music is whether it earns the emotional state it's asking us to believe in. This song finally does that, musically taking on the role of a Switchblade, changing out its many knives in quick succession. So excellent. The next song is Roll. And then the song after that is My Plan. So My Plan is, I'm kidding. Listen, I can get behind troll music. I genuinely think Gnarly is one of the best songs of all time, and I'm not being facetious. I just don't know about Roll. The nursery rhyme music. It's garish without any rhyme or reason. Something about it triggers my fight or flight response. I can defend a lot and do defend a lot, but I don't think I can defend Roll. I just don't see the vision. I can usually try to see some of the campiness to the delivery, but it's just not present here. I feel like I'm stuck with a cousin who I haven't seen since I was 8, and we don't have the same humor anymore. And we don't get along. There's like a tension there. Like everything I say, they just respond to it with a confused face, so the conversation doesn't go anywhere, and I feel crazy for even saying anything. That's the vibe I get with Roll. I just don't know what I'm looking at. This song could be an eldritch beast in disguise, keen on stealing my soul. Roll is the wide-eyed goat that doesn't move along with the others in the pasture, staring at me, staring at it with an unknowable intent. There's something ungodly and unholy about the way it regards me with its unnervingly blank gaze. It's purely just not of this world, so we gotta move on quickly. Anyways, we start to round out the end of the album with My Plan, which may be an unpopular opinion, but this is another highlight for me. It perfectly crosses the territory that I think aespa want to exist in as they progress in their careers. This song begins as an unassuming piano-focused track that you could find on a coffee shop playlist. After the first very sweet, very sentimental chorus, we're met with an off-putting musical break as the more electronic sensibilities begin to kick in. The song ends up executing and meeting the concept of its own title. It lures you in with warmth and sweetness before revealing its sharper electronic edges. Our narrator's plan to make you hers is more playfully dubious than what we gleaned on first impression. The production carries out a plan of its own. It adds so well to the bittersweet conceptual understanding of this album. And importantly, very importantly, it doesn't aim for some huge cathartic payoff, and it doesn't need to. This song earns its place through coherence. Every section naturally grows out of the last, and by the end, I can completely buy into the emotional space it's created. That's all I need aespa to be given. They know how to take it from there. We close out with Til We Die, the obligatory, this one's for the fans anthem. It's a perfectly fine pop rock ballad, but these songs rarely do much for me personally. I've always found the strongest fan songs to be the ones that still reinforce the themes of the albums they're attached to, rather than, I guess sort of stepping outside of them for a final breaking of the fourth wall moment. Til We Die is the one moment of the album where Lemonade's conceptual thread loosens. It's really not even there. There are so many avenues we could have taken when it comes to connecting the themes of Lemonade to aespa's relationship with the fans, admitting with honesty and care for the fans that there is a bitterness behind this whole experience. But I don't know, it's an okay place to end the album. I don't find it offensive, but after spending 30 minutes exploring bitterness and resilience, I find myself wishing that the closer engaged with those ideas just a little more directly. With the conceptual themes of this album in mind, my roundabout understanding of Lemonade is a similar kind of bittersweetness. This isn't aespa's most revolutionary project, nor do I think every creative decision lands exactly as they were intended or maybe where they should have. It singles mistake restraint for conviction and sweetness for resolution. But the album itself quickly goes on to remind us why aespa have become one of the defining groups of their generation. At its best, Lemonade understands that bitterness is something you need to carry forward to make lemonade. If you decide to completely throw out the lemons, the sugar water you have left is not going to be good. It's not going to be worth it. And this is it. The record succeeds whenever it allows the metaphorical bitterness of the lemons they've been given to shape its music in addition to the lyrics. It fills these songs with a texture and conviction that have always made aespa so compelling. Lemonade the album feels like an affirmation of who aespa are today, where songs like Switchblade and Camouflage hint at an even more exciting and promising future that is still waiting to unfold. I really hope the positive reception to those two songs resonates with aespa and their team. I don't want them stuck in hyperpop forever though. I purely just want for them to be allowed to follow through on whatever it is they decide to tackle. aespa are at their best when they stop worrying about appearing powerful and simply allow themselves to just be powerful. The moment they commit to that is where the magic happens, like we saw with Whiplash, where the rest of the industry is left trying to catch up with them after the fact. These are my thoughts on Lemonade. Thank you for listening to this. If you did, please let me know your thoughts on the album. Considering we're almost 2 months past the album's release, I'm very curious if your thoughts have changed on it over time and things like that. Yeah, thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.